welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you enjoy quiet expeditions like this, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight, you're stepping off the hard gravel plain and into the Chebi dunes at dusk. You expect ground, but the sand gives way in slow slides, and your boot prints soften behind you. Within minutes, the wind tidies your back trail, and the dunes stop offering dependable landmarks. So you keep your navigation small and practical. Polaris above, a faint radio mast blink ahead, wind on your cheek. Your pace drops because every step up a slope costs water, heat, and time you can't negotiate back. Then you notice a half-buried jerry can and a set of prints that go in but don't return. As your electronics start to fade in the cold air, what happens when the dunes shift and your last reliable fix fails? You squat beside the jerry can and brush sand off the plastic with your glove. It is sun-bleached and scratched, the cap half unscrewed like someone meant to come back. You tip it gently, listening for slosh, and get nothing but dry, rattling grit. The wind threads through the handle and makes a thin, complaining whistle. You look at the prints again, and you realize they are not old. The edges have not softened into that rounded, erased look the gives everything. They still have tread marks, sharp enough to read like a mood, and they angle down the slip face into the lee side where sand piles deep. That is the first escalation, because the dunes are not just empty now. Someone was here recently, and the desert has already started editing them out. You check your own gear. More out of superstition than logic, your water sits high in the pack, close to your spine. Your radio is clipped to a strap where you can thumb it awake. Your headlamp is off because light can ruin night vision fast. You take one slow breath and the air tastes like cold pennies and dust. You have a choice, and it is not a heroic one. You can follow those one-way prints and risk a trap in loose sand. Or you can ignore them and keep to your planned line for the station. Your job on this run is simple. On paper, you are the last pair of boots in a small resupply push. A remote weather station needs filters, batteries, and a water top-off. The team rotated out before night because they had a vehicle and a schedule. You have neither, just a pack and the kind of confidence that fades fast. You decide to approach the prince, but not commit to their line yet. You step closer to the lip of the slip face and test the sand. It collapses under your boot like flour, sliding in a soft hiss. The dune is a frozen wave, and you are standing on its breaking edge. You back off and angle instead toward a higher crest. Low routes vanish first in an and you need sightlines. You start climbing, and your cabs immediately file a complaint. Sand does not hold still long enough to reward effort. Each step up is half a step back, and your breath gets louder. Behind you, the Hamada gravel plain is already dim, a hard world fading. Ahead, the dunes rise in stacked ribs, silvering under thin moonlight. The radio mast blink is faint, and it could be a star with ambition. You stop every few minutes and check Polaris, because the sky at least behaves. You keep the wind on your right cheek, because it gives you a constant. That is your navigation triangle now. Star, blink, and skin. The first time you crest a dune, you expect a view. Instead, you get repetition, dune after dune. each one pretending to be the first. The erg is an ocean that forgot how to reflect light properly. You look down into the troughs and see darkness pooled there. Those interdune basins are quieter, flatter, and tempting. They are also where cold sinks and where mistakes can sit unnoticed. You stay high because being seen is sometimes the same as being safe. You adjust your straps because the pack shifts as you climb. A strap buckle clicks and the sound travels farther than you want. The desert takes noise and stretches it thin, like taffy. You catch yourself listening for another footstep that is not yours. There is none, just wind dragging grains along the crest. You keep moving, and the moon rises higher. It turns the dune ridges into knife edges of pale light. The slipfaces on the far sides stay black, swallowing detail. You step carefully because a fall here is not dramatic. It is just expensive, scraped skin, spilled water, lost time. Time is what the erg charges you for first. Around 9 or 10 at night, the wind changes its tone. Not louder, just different, as if someone turned a dial. You feel it swing from your cheek toward your nose. Your triangle shifts, and suddenly, your body loses its easy reference. You stop on a crest and face into it. The air is warmer now, a strange gift that feels suspicious. Warm wind at night means the surface layers are moving. It means the dunes are not resting. They are traveling. You watch the crestline ahead, and it looks scalloped, freshly cut. A pattern you do not remember from a few minutes ago. You blink hard, thinking it is fatigue, but the line keeps changing, subtle ripples migrating like a slow shiver. Then you hear it, low and distant, like a cello note held too long. The dunes are singing. Not every dune does it, and not every night. But when the grains are the right size and the slope is steep, they hum. It is friction turned into sound, a whole hill whispering at once. It should be beautiful, and it is, in the way storms are beautiful. Also, in the way storms do not care about your plans. The warm wind keeps pushing, and you feel grains ticking your jacket. You pull your scarf higher over your mouth, because dust is patient. You take out your map, not because it will save you, because it will remind you what the world is supposed to look like. Erg Chebi is not the largest sand sea in the Sahara. It is one of the most famous because it is accessible and dramatic. Tall dunes, tight corridors, and a habit of swallowing tracks. The map shows a line toward a clay pan where water is cached. It is a known hard point, and that matters. The dunes themselves do not qualify as points. They qualify as suggestions that wander. You decide to reroute, aiming for that interdune corridor leading to the pan. It should be firmer underfoot and easier walking. It should also keep you lower, out of the full wind. You descend off the ridge, and the sand under you becomes softer. You slide a little, boot skating, and you use your poles to brake. The air down here smells slightly different, less dry, more mineral. Your headlamp stays off, but you let the moon do the work. You pick your way along the corridor, and the walls of sand rise on both sides. The wind that felt broad up top becomes focused here. It funnels through the channel like air through a cracked window. Sand pellets sting your cheeks and find the gap at your collar. You turn your face away, but it circles and hits you anyway. You learn quickly that the wind has more angles than you do. Your gloves start to feel gritty inside, like you are wearing sandpaper. You flex your fingers and realize fine motor control is already slipping. Zippers become harder to catch. The radio knob feels small, and your thumb is less sure. You take a knee in the lee of a small ridge and drink a measured sip. Not a gulp, just a mouthful you let sit, then swallow slowly. Water at night is cold, and it shocks your teeth. It also steadies your thinking, which is the real reason you do it. You pull your GPS from a pocket and wake it. The screen glows, then flickers, then brightens. Too much. You turn it down because light is a resource too. It hunts for satellites with the enthusiasm of someone making excuses. It gives you a fix, then jitters, then jumps sideways. You tell yourself it is just poor reception in the trough. Then the battery icon drops faster than it should. Cold air and constant screen use are a mean combination. You tap it off, then on again, and it throws an error message. Your reliable fix has become moody, and mood is not navigation. You tuck it away and feel the weight of that decision settle. Now, you are back to stars, wind, and slope. Dead reckoning, the old system, where errors do not disappear. They stack quietly until you are walking a beautiful line into nowhere. You stand and keep going, counting steps between small crestlets. You note the wind on your face, trying to keep it consistent. But the corridor bends, and the wind tumbles and swirls. It stops being a compass and becomes a prankster. You climb back up to a higher rib to escape the funnel. On the ridge, the singing dunes are louder, closer now. A low vibration you can feel through your soles. You take another bearing on Polaris and correct a few degrees. The mast blink is still there, or you are still imagining it. Either way, you commit, because hesitation burns energy. You move along the ridgeline, keeping the high ground. The sand up here is firmer, packed by wind, but it is also sharper, with ripple ridges that trip your ankles. You catch yourself micro-stumbling, a tired person's clumsiness. And tired in the desert is not a feeling, it is a process. Like corrosion, you notice your breathing has a rasp, a little dry crackle. Dust is already lining your throat. You swallow, and it does not help much. Around midnight, you start seeing the erg's dark logic. Every dune has a gentle windward slope and a steep slip face. The windward side is a ramp, the slip face is a wall. If you choose wrong too many times, you spend the night climbing walls. You angle across to stay on windward ramps whenever possible. It adds distance, but saves your legs. Your schedule is gone now, replaced by what the dunes allow. You glance at your watch anyway, out of habit. The numbers glow briefly, then fade as you cover it. Time still exists, but it feels less relevant than your next step. You drop into another trough, and the air changes fast. It gets heavier, colder, as if you walked into a cellar. This is the cold sink effect, the basin collecting chill like water. Heat escapes upward, and cold settles down here, patient and thick. You feel sweat on your back, cool too quickly. The shirt that was helping you vent now starts stealing warmth. Your shoulders tighten, and your chest feels a little constricted. Sound changes too. A grain slide on a dune face carries farther than it should. Your own steps sound louder, more deliberate. Even your breathing becomes a noise you want to hide. You consider pushing on anyway, just to stay warm. But moving blind in a basin is expensive. You could waste hours circling a low bowl, chasing a ridge that is not there. You stop and make a decision point, the kind nobody brags about. You choose to bivouac briefly, not a full camp, just a controlled pause. You find a dune shoulder that blocks the wind and kneel behind it. You drop your pack and sit on it because sand steals heat fast. You pull your scarf tighter and tuck your hands under your arms. You take 2 small sips of water, then stop. Rationing feels cruel until you imagine tomorrow without it. You check the sky again, and Polaris holds steady. That is comforting in a bleak, mechanical way. The earth spins, the star stays, and you shiver anyway. You try to rest, but the sand does not let you. It slides under your hips, filling every gap, finding every seam. You close your eyes, and the wind keeps talking. Not loud, just constant, like a radio stuck between stations. Your thoughts get strange in the quiet. You imagine the jerry can again, half buried, cap loose. You imagine the person who set it down, thinking they would be right back. You tell yourself not to make stories, because stories waste energy too. But the mind does it anyway, just to stay occupied. After a short, shallow rest, you force yourself up. Your joints protest, stiff from cold and crouching. You stamp your feet to wake them and feel grit grind in your socks. That grit is already a future blister, waiting patiently. You decide to move again before you cool further. You climb out of the basin and back toward a low ridge. The eastern horizon has a faint lightening now. Not sunrise, just gray intention. Dawn in the desert arrives slowly, like a careful intruder. As the light grows, shapes return. You see the clay pan you aimed for, a wide, pale patch in the distance, flat, open, and so inviting it feels like a trick. From here, it looks like bare, hard ground, the kind that saves ankles, the kind that makes time feel manageable again. You angle toward it, grateful for something that is not a dune. The approach is gentle, and your pace increases without you meaning to. You step down off the last sand ridge and onto the pan's edge. The surface is crusted, pale, with a faint polygon pattern like cracked paint. You tap it with your pole, expecting a firm click. It answers with a dull sound, softer than it should be. You pause, and the wind shifts again, cooler now with morning. You look at the pan and notice a faint sheen in places. Not water, not exactly, more like the suggestion of dampness, a mirage that got promoted to reality and is now trying to hide. You tell yourself it is still better than the dunes. You tell yourself you will cross quickly and be back on sand beyond it. You take a few steps onto the crust, and it holds. That is the dangerous part, the confidence-building part. Your boots leave shallow prints, not deep, and you almost smile. You take another step, then another, and you feel your shoulders loosen. The station is still far, but the mast blink should be clearer soon. Then the crust changes under your left boot. It gives just a little, like stepping on a thin board. You freeze, and your weight shifts instinctively to the other foot. The other foot sinks too, slower, more deliberate. The pan is not a floor, it is a lid. You pull your foot up carefully, and it comes with a wet suction sound. Mud clings to the sole, cold and heavy. You step back onto firmer crust near the edge and breathe out. You are tired, and the pan is offering you a shortcut with teeth. But turning back means dunes again, and more climbing, and more water. You stand there and calculate with the only math that matters now. Risk versus cost, gamble versus grind. The crust ahead looks mostly intact, and the flatness is hypnotic. You decide to cross, but you change how you move. You widen your stance and test each step with your pole first. You spread your weight, moving like someone on thin ice. The pole pokes through in one spot, then another, and you route around. For a few minutes, it works. Then your pole sinks straight down, clean and easy, like the desert has finally decided to tell the truth. You stop with your weight half committed, one boot on crust, one boot hovering. The pole comes up with a slow peel, coated in black-brown paste that should not be here. This is not a simple dry pan anymore. This is a bowl that caught rare rain, then hid it under a lid of salt and sand. You take another careful step anyway, because exhaustion is persuasive. The crust holds for a breath. Then it fractures with a quiet crackle. Your left leg drops shin deep into cold mud. It is a shock that climbs your bones, like you stepped into winter. The mud grips your boot and does not want it back. You try to pull straight up, and the suction answers like an insult. Your knee twists a little, and you freeze again, because pain here is a multiplier. You lean forward and plant the pole ahead, using it like a third leg. You spread your weight onto the pack straps, letting your torso help. Slowly, you work your foot free with small rocking motions, not yanks. It comes out with a wet pop, and the boot is suddenly twice as heavy. Mud sheets off the sole, then slumps back into the hole you made. The hole fills with cloudy water that looks almost drinkable at first glance. Congratulations, you found water in the Sahara. It is the kind of water that will give you diarrhea and a slow exit. You shuffle backward onto firmer crust and breathe through your scarf. Your heart is thumping too hard for how little you moved. The pan looks the same as it did 5 minutes ago, which is the problem. Nothing about it warns you where it is solid and where it is a trapdoor. You kneel and scrape at the surface with your pole tip. A thin white crust flakes away, showing darker, damp sand beneath. This is a playa, a temporary lake bed, and it lies the way deserts lie. In wet years, it collects water, then evaporates, leaving salts behind. In dry years, it bakes into something like ceramic and invites shortcuts. You arrived in the awkward middle year when the skin formed but the body stayed soft. You could go around the edge, back toward dunes, and lose time you do not own. Or you can pick a line across, moving like you are crossing a frozen pond. You choose the bad option with rules. Pole first, then foot, then transfer weight, and never let momentum decide. For a short stretch, it works again, and you start to believe in it. Belief is expensive. The crust under your right boot gives way all at once, not cracking, just collapsing. Your right leg plunges deeper than before, almost to the knee. The mud is colder down there, and it clamps around your calf like a hand. Your body pitches forward and you windmill an arm to keep the pack from pulling you down. The pack shifts and you feel the hard edge of a water bottle press against your spine. You plant your pole, but it sinks too, offering no leverage. Now you are in the pan, anchored in the wrong medium, with no solid point to push from. You lower your other knee onto the crust carefully, trying to spread your weight. The crust complains and cracks outward in a spider web. You stop breathing for a second, as if that will reduce your mass. Then you do the only thing that works in suction mud. You go slow and you go horizontal. You lay your torso forward onto your pack, using it like a raft. You unclip one shoulder strap, then the other, so the pack can move independently. You slide the pack ahead onto crust that looks slightly brighter, slightly more salted. Then you pull your trapped leg up in millimeter increments, twisting the boot gently. Mud slurps and releases in grudging stages. Your knee rises, your calf comes free, and finally, your boot breaks the seal. You do not stand yet. Standing is how you sink again. You crawl, awkwardly, dragging your legs behind you, using your forearms. The mud smears into your sleeves and gloves, turning fabric into weight. You reach the firmer edge of the pan, where the crust thickens near the dune mine. You roll onto sand like it is a mattress, and the sand accepts you without argument. You lie there and let your pulse slow, listening to your own breath rasp. The sun is higher now, and the cold that helped you survive the night is gone. Heat is coming, and it will not negotiate with wet clothing. You sit up and look at your legs. Both boots are caked in dark mud up to mid-shin. The mud is already drying at the edges, turning matte and gritty. It is going to become abrasive concrete, glued to leather and seams. Every step from now on will be sandpaper applied with your full body weight. You loosen the laces with clumsy fingers and pull one boot off. The sock comes with it, half stuck, and the smell is sour and mineral. Mud has worked into the weave, and grit is lodged where your toes bend. You scrape the sock against a dune slope, trying to knock off the worst. Dry sand sticks to the wet mud, building a crusty coating like breading. You peel the sock free and wring it once, and nothing useful comes out. There is moisture, but it is not clean, and it is not enough. You check your skin, looking for cuts you cannot afford. Your shin has a red scrape, shallow, already stinging in the air. The desert loves small wounds because they are slow. You switch to the other boot, and it is worse. Mud packed into the tread, into the eyelets, into every crease. You try to rinse it with a splash of water, then stop yourself mid-motion. That instinct would kill you by afternoon. Water is not for cleaning. Water is for thinking. You take the pole and use the tip to dig mud out of the sole grooves. Chunks fall onto the sand, and the sand immediately starts drinking the moisture away. You work until your hands cramp, then you force the boot back on. The sock goes on damp and gritty, and it feels like punishment. Congratulations, you have invented portable blister manufacturing. You stand, testing your weight, and your boots feel wrong. Heavier, stiffer, and slightly loose where mud has shifted the fit. You take a step and feel grit grind under your heel. A tiny crunching sermon. Pace is going to drop again. You look back at the pan, at your holes and smears. From a distance, it will look untouched, innocent, still inviting. You could mark it, build a small cairn, warn the next tired person, but the next wind will erase your warning in an hour. That is the desert's editorial policy. You shoulder your pack again, and you feel the straps pull at wet fabric. The sun is now a white disk, and shadows shrink into narrow stains. You need to move before heat turns this place into a griddle. You check Polaris out of habit, then laugh quietly into your scarf. Daylight has erased your best guide. So, you go back to terrain and logic. The station is near a Jebel outcrop, an island of rock beyond the dunes. Rock does not migrate overnight. Rock is the only honest landmark in a sand sea. You angle away from the pan, climbing the nearest dune ramp to regain sightlines. Each step up drags at your boots, mud stiffening as it dries. Your calves start burning almost immediately. The dune crest comes, and with it a view that is both helpful and cruel. Helpful because you can see farther. Cruel because everything looks the same again. You scan for the radio mast blink, but daylight has bullied it out of visibility. Now, you are navigating by silhouette and hunch. You pick a far point, a slight dark bump that could be rock or could be a dune pretending. You start walking toward it, using the wind to steady your line. The wind is weaker now, replaced by a stillness that feels fake. Desert air can look motionless while it moves in slow convection. Hot ground heats air. Air rises. Cooler air slides in low, and the whole system breathes. You cannot see it, but you can feel it as a faint upward pull on sweat. Your skin starts to warm, then to bake. Your damp socks turn from cold discomfort to steaming irritation. You stop and tape a hot spot on your heel through clenched teeth. You do it early, because late is too late. The tape sticks to damp skin poorly, and you press it down anyway. Your fingers are gritty, and the adhesive grabs sand like it is hungry. You stand again and keep moving, because stopping is its own trap now. Heat is not a sudden event. Heat is a slow takeover. By late morning, the dunes are radiating back at you, not just from above, but from below. You are walking between two ovens, one in the sky and one under your feet. Your breath feels warmer going in than it should. You start taking shallow breaths, not because it helps, but because your body thinks it helps. You force yourself to slow down because rushing in heat is a lie. Speed does not shorten suffering here. It just moves the suffering into your organs. So you adopt a survival pacing rhythm, crest to crest in short bursts. Walk for a handful of minutes, then drop into the lee side for a micro rest. In the lee, the wind is quieter and the sand is marginally cooler. You kneel with your back to the slope, tack on, head lowered. You count 10 slow breaths, then stand again. This is how you cross a furnace without becoming part of it. You drink by schedule, not by thirst. Thirst is a dramatic storyteller, and it will exaggerate. You take a timed mouthful, swish it once, swallow, and stop. You keep your lips covered because evaporation is theft. The scarf over your mouth becomes damp with breath, then dries quickly, leaving salt. Salt rubs your skin raw, and you ignore it because you have bigger problems. Around, noon, the landscape begins to play tricks that feel personal. Heat shimmer makes the horizon wobble, as if the world is melting. Dune edges blur and double. You think you recognize a ridge you crossed earlier. The same curve, the same notch. Your brain pattern matches, desperate for familiarity. But when you climb it, the view does not match your memory. It is a different ridge, a different set of troughs, the same repeating geometry. This is how ergs erase you, not with drama, but with repetition. You stop on a crest and turn slowly, scanning. Your eyes water, not from emotion, from glare and grit. You blink hard and taste dust. You try to pick out the jebel again. There, faintly, a darker line against the haze. It looks too low to matter, which is how distance lies in deserts. You set your direction toward it and commit again. You do not allow yourself to zigzag for easier slopes. Zigzags waste time, and time wastes water. So you take the hard lines, up and over, up and over. Your compromised boots begin to announce themselves. The mud that dried on the outside has turned into a crust that cracks at the flex points. Each crack drops gritty crumbs into your socks. The grit migrates under your toes, under your heels, finding pressure points like a locksmith. You feel the first real blister form, a hot swelling spot that pulses. You adjust your gait to protect it, and that creates new pressure elsewhere. Congratulations! You are now negotiating with your own feet. You spot a strange shape half buried on a dune shoulder, a gray tangle. At first, it looks like driftwood, which is funny because there is no ocean here. Then you realize it is the skeleton of an acacia, sun-bleached and picked clean. Acacia trees survive at the edge of deserts where roots can reach deep moisture. Here, this one did not. It stands as a dead umbrella, branches twisted, catching wind-blown debris. A strip of cloth is snagged on one thorn, flapping weakly. It is faded, patterned, maybe once part of a headscarf or a shirt. You walk to it because anything different is information. The sand around the base is slightly mounded, a mini dune formed by the tree acting as a windbreak. That is what happens when you interrupt the wind here. The desert immediately starts building around you. You touch the cloth, and it feels brittle, sun-cooked. You pull gently, and it tears with almost no resistance. You take a longer strip anyway, because you need shade, and you will not get it. You tie it loosely between two branches, making a pathetic little awning. It casts a thin shadow, not enough to cool you, but enough to hide your eyes. You kneel under it and rest for a minute longer than usual. You take another measured sip, and you listen. In the daytime, the desert has fewer sounds. No night wind singing dunes, no cold, sink hush. Just the faint hiss of sand moving in tiny surface avalanches. You look at the acacia skeleton and the cloth, and you understand what it is. It is a net. Wind lines collect the lost, because wind pushes debris until it hits something that stops it. People drop things when they are tired, and tired people get lost. The desert does not hunt you. It just keeps what falls down. You stand and look at your route again, using the tree as a reference point. You will not see it again once you crest the next dune. So you fix its position in your mind like a pin in a blank map. Then you move on, because late day is your next real window. By early afternoon, the heat is at its most indifferent. Your sweat output drops, not because you are doing less, but because your body is conserving. That is not a good sign. You wet your lips with your tongue and they feel like paper. Your urine, if you were checking, would be dark and mean. You do not check because you already know. Your steps become slower and your micro rests become more frequent. You begin to plan for an afternoon pause, whether you want to or not. Desert travel is often a split shift. Move at night, survive midday, move again in evening. You did not want to add another rest period, but the erg is writing your schedule now. You keep pushing until the wind changes again. At first, it is a relief, a faint breeze on your cheek. Then it strengthens, and you see it on the dune crests. The tops begin to smoke, thin veils of sand lifting off and streaming away. The light changes, turning flatter, as if someone lowered contrast on the world. This is the beginning of deletion. A localized sandstorm does not arrive like a wall. It builds like a mood. Wind picks up, then picks up again, and suddenly the air is full of moving grit. You pull your scarf tighter, wrap it higher over your nose. Sand finds the gap anyway, tapping your teeth when you breathe. Visibility drops from far ridges to the next dune, then to the next trough. The horizon vanishes, and with it, your sense of scale. Depth becomes guesswork. You take a step and cannot tell if the slope is gentle or steep until your ankle rolls. You try to look down for your footprints, and they are already softening. Seconds after you step, the wind blurs the edges. In a minute, your track is a rumor. You stop walking because now walking is just donating yourself to the erg. You pick the nearest dune with a steep slip face and drop behind it. The slip face is the lee side, sheltered from direct wind, like the quiet behind a moving truck. You crouch low, back against the sand, and you feel grains pouring over the crest above you. They land on your shoulders, on your pack, whispering down like dry rain. You anchor your cloth strip and any loose straps because the wind loves loose ends. You turn your face away and breathe through fabric. Slow and deliberate. Your eyes sting even closed, grit working under eyelids. The sound becomes constant, a steady hiss with occasional, sharper gusts. This is what the erg does when it is busy. It sandblasts the world into simpler shapes. Time gets strange while you wait. You cannot see far enough to measure progress, so progress becomes meaningless. You check your water without drinking, just to reassure yourself it still exists. You feel the weight, and it comforts you briefly. Then you remember the pan, and you remember you are on a budget you cannot balance. A gust hits harder, and sand spills down in a thicker sheet. You tuck your chin and let it pass. The good news is you are not moving, so you are not getting lost actively. The bad news is the dune you are hiding behind is moving anyway. Wind pushes sand up the windward side, over the crest, and down onto you. That is how dunes migrate. They are conveyor belts made of grains. The whole dune shifts in the direction of prevailing wind, sometimes inches in a day during storms. It does not sound like much until it is your door, your track, your marker. You wait until the worst of it eases, which takes longer than your patience. When you finally lift your head, the air is still full of dust, but you can see outlines again. The light is late afternoon now, warmer, angled. You stand slowly, joints stiff, and look around. Your shelter dune does not look the same anymore. The crest above you has softened, like someone ran a thumb along its edge. The trough you are sitting in is slightly deeper, slightly wider, and full of new ripples. You expected to lose time. You did not expect to lose reference. You glance for your earlier footprints out of instinct and find nothing but a textured blank. The sandstorm did not just hide your trail, it rewrote the page. You turn slowly, keeping your eyes low to avoid the last floating grit. Shapes come back in pieces. First the nearest ridge, then the next, then the faintest suggestion of distance. The horizon still looks unfinished, like the world forgot to render the far background. You reach for the one external confirmation you were counting on. A small marker you left earlier, a scrap of cloth tied to a short stick at a high point. Something humble, something you could recognize in a sea of humility. You walk to where you are sure you placed it. The spot is wrong now. Not because you misremembered, because the dune moved and your memory stayed put. You dig with your glove, scooping sand aside in fast, irritated handfuls. Your fingers hit nothing but more sand, and then harder packed sand beneath. No stick, no cloth, no little human insistence that direction is a thing you can pin down. Congratulations! Your last signpost has been promoted to sediment. You stop digging, because digging is a hobby, not a solution. You stand still and let your breathing slow. Panic is a waste of water. You check the sun without looking at it directly, using the light on the dunes. Late afternoon, angled, shadows, returning to something you can use. The heat is easing, but the air still holds that baked taste. You have to decide what kind of mistake you want to risk next. Walking now is possible again, but it is not gentle. The wind is still brisk, and it keeps dragging sand off the crests. Not a storm anymore, just the desert tidying up after itself. You pull your scarf down for one careful breath, then back up. Your lips feel cracked, and your tongue feels too big for your mouth. You take a small drink, timed, controlled, and you hate every swallow. The water is warmer now, and it tastes faintly like plastic. You check the bottle that took the hit in the mud pan, the one that pressed against your spine when you almost went down. It looks fine at first glance. Then you see the seam near the base, a pale stress line. You squeeze gently, and a bead forms. Not a drip yet, just a threat. You tighten the cap as if that will help a crack. You rotate the bottle and wedge it in a different pocket, hoping pressure stays off it. Hope is not a strategy, but it is what you have. Your next move is simple in concept. You need something that will not migrate. The dunes have proven they can walk away while you blink, so you aim for geology, the kind of place that can only sit there and judge you. You climb to the highest nearby crest because sight is worth pain. The windward side is a long ramp, firm enough to bite into. Your boots grind, the dried mud cracking again at the toes. The grit inside shifts, and a blister flares hot like a warning light. You keep climbing anyway, because the alternative is wandering in low bowls. At the top you stop, bent slightly forward, letting the wind hit your face. It dries sweat instantly, turning your skin tight. You scan for the dark island you saw earlier, the Jebel outcrop beyond the sand. At first, you see nothing. Then, far off, a low, jagged line interrupts the dune rhythm. It looks unreal, like a tear in fabric showing darker material underneath. You fix your eyes on it until it feels solid in your mind. That is your anchor now. Not the station, not the mast blink, not the erased marker. Just rock. You choose a bearing by aligning the Jebel with a notch between two dunes. You pick a route that favors windward slopes, even if it adds distance. Slipfaces are fast, but they are also traps for ankles and morale. You start walking, and the first 100 steps feel easy. That is how the desert gets you to spend. The sand has cooled slightly, and the light is kinder now. Long shadows paint every ripple, making the surface look sharp and detailed. Beautiful. If you ignore the part where beauty is trying to kill you, you move crest to crest, using the shadows to read slope angles. You stay high when you can, because low corridors still funnel wind. But sometimes you have to drop, because dunes stack like waves, and your legs are not infinite. When you descend into a trough, the air is warmer and dustier. The wind overhead skips across the crest, and down here, it eddies. It swirls sand into small spirals that chase each other and then die. You taste grit between your teeth. You swallow, and the grit stays. The Jebel seems to take forever to change size. Distance in the desert is a cruel optical illusion. There are no trees to scale against, no buildings, no power lines, just sand geometry and a dark line that refuses to get closer. You set small goals. Reach the next high ridge. Reach the next cluster of sharper ripples. Reach the place where the sand changes color slightly, more orange, less pale. Each goal is a way to keep your mind from asking bigger questions, because bigger questions lead to spirals, and spirals lead to sitting down, and sitting down leads to being collected by wind lines, like that cloth on the dead acacia. As the sun drops, the desert changes again. The heat releases fast, as if someone opened a door. Your skin cools, then cools too much. The sweat that dried earlier leaves salt on your clothes, and now the salt rubs. You can feel every seam. You can feel the inside of your boots, every grain shifting with every step. You stop to adjust your socks and discover the first blister has already torn. The skin is raw, shiny, and angry. You dab it with a corner of cloth, then cover it with tape. The tape sticks poorly because dust is everywhere, even in your pores. You press it down anyway because doing something feels better than doing nothing. You stand again, and your foot protests. You alter your gait unconsciously, saving the heel, sacrificing the toes. Every adaptation has a cost. By the time twilight arrives, your pace is slowed more than you want to admit. You look back once, just to see how far you have come. The dunes behind you are already losing the day's sharp shadows. They blur into a soft, dark ocean. Your path back is not just hard, it is gone. The Jebel ahead is closer now, unmistakable. It has edges that do not match dunes. Rock breaks the wind differently. Even from far away, you can see a faint haze line near its base. That is sand piling against something that refuses to move. That is what you want, a refusal. Night begins to return, and with it, the stars. The first bright ones appear. then more, until the sky becomes a map again. You find Polaris and you feel a small relief that is almost stupid. The ground can lie, but the sky has rules. You correct your lines slightly, not trusting your earlier notch alignment. You keep the Jebel in front of you, Polaris off to your left, and you walk. The temperature drops steadily. The cold comes up from the sand, seeping through your soles. Your damp sock from the mud pan becomes a cold sponge again. You start to shiver lightly, not from fear, from physics. In deserts, you can freeze under the same sky that cooked you hours earlier. Congratulations, you live on a planet with mood swings. As you approach the last dunes before the rock, you notice the sand texture change. The grains are coarser, mixed with tiny pebbles. The dunes are lower here, less pure. As if the erg is losing its grip, you start seeing small stones on the surface, scattered like pepper. Then more stones, then patches of hard-packed ground. You step onto the first strip of gravel and almost stumble because your feet expect give. The sudden firmness feels like stepping onto concrete after a trampoline. Your ankles wobble, then stabilize. Your calves relax for the first time in hours. The wind feels different too. It is louder because it has less sand to cushion it. It whistles over stone and through small channels carved by water long ago. Water in a place that looks like it hates water? You climb a low gravel fan at the base of the Jebel, the sand thins out behind you, and the world becomes sharper. Rock fragments crunch under your boots. A clean sound, satisfying. But the satisfaction does not last. Rock has its own rules, and they are not friendly. The gravel is made of angular pieces that bite into your soles. Your compromised boots flex, and the dried mud cracks again. The grit inside shifts, and your raw blister meets a hard edge. Pain shoots up your leg, bright and immediate. You stop, teeth clenched, and breathe slowly until it becomes manageable. This is the new tax. Sand drained your energy. Rock charges in pain. You keep moving because the station is supposed to be near this outcrop, not on top, but tucked into a sheltered spot where wind is less violent. You look for anything man-made, a straight line, a metallic glint, a shape that does not belong. At first, you see only stone, layered and cracked like old dried skin. Then, against the darkening sky, a thin vertical line, an antenna mast. It is not blinking now because the sun is gone and you are closer. It just stands there, stiff and indifferent. You let out a breath you did not realize you were holding. Your pace quickens for a few steps, then you force it back down. Rushing now is how you fall and break something. Right at the finish, you follow the base of the rock, staying on the lee side where the wind piles sand. You expect to find a track, an access path, maybe tire marks. Instead, you find a slope of sand pressed up against stone, like snowdrift. The erg has climbed the Jebel's shoulder, trying to bury it. You pick your way along the edge, looking for the station's footprint, a small building, a metal box, a door, a solar panel. You find the solar panel first, half buried at the lower edge. It is tilted at a sad angle, its surface scratched by wind-blown sand. The panel looks frosted, not from ice, but from abrasion. Sand is a patient sanding belt, and metal is not special to it. You walk closer, and the ground transitions from gravel to sand again. The station is here, but it is not sitting proudly on the surface. It is crouched, half swallowed. You see a corner of corrugated metal, then a vent pipe, then the top edge of a door frame. The rest is under a dune that has decided this is a good place to settle. You circle downwind because you know how dunes behave around obstacles. Wind hits the upwind side, drops sand, then scours the lee side. If there is an entrance, it will be where the wind has been scraping, not where it has been dumping. You find a shallow hollow behind the station, a pocket where gravel shows through. Your boots hit hard ground again, and you feel a small victory. The station wall rises out of the sand here, dented, scratched, and humming faintly. You put your gloved hand on the metal, and it feels cold, even after a hot day. Metal sheds heat fast. You follow the wall until you find the door area. The door is there, technically. It is also packed with sand up to the handle. The access track that should lead here is gone, filled in like it never existed. You stare at it for a long moment. This is the joke the erg saves for last. You made it to shelter, and shelter has been remodeled into a sand sculpture. You drop your pack and kneel, because kneeling is the only posture that makes sense. You start digging with your hands. The sand is loose, and it collapses back into the hole as fast as you clear it. So you change tactics. You use the flat of your pole to shovel, pushing sand away from the door in a wide arc. You do not try to make a deep hole. You try to make a ramp, something that will not collapse immediately. Sand is stable at shallow angles, unstable at steep ones. You work with the angle, not against it. Your shoulders burn and your hands cramp. Every scoop sends a small puff of dust into your face. You keep your scarf on, and the fabric grows damp with breath again. After several minutes, the handle is clear. You grab it and pull. The door does not move. It is not locked. It is simply glued shut by pressure and sand in the seams. You lean your weight into it carefully, testing. The frame creaks, the metal flexes, and the door gives a millimeter. Then it stops, as if reconsidering. You step back, breathing slowly, and look for another access point. A vent hatch, a service panel, anything that does not have a dune sitting in its lap. You find a small hatch higher up, partly clear, secured with simple latches. Your fingers fumble the latches because fine motor control is still compromised. Grit has invaded the hinges, and the latch resists like it is alive. You work it back and forth until it finally flips open with a dull snap. You lift the hatch. A breath of stale, cool air comes out, smelling like dust and batteries. It smells like safety and like neglect. The opening is small, but it is enough to get an arm inside. You feel around for an interior bolt or handle. Your glove brushes a cable, a metal edge, then finally a lever. You pull. Inside, something shifts. Outside, the door gives another small movement, like a reluctant jaw. You return to the door, grip the handle, and pull again. This time it opens a few inches, sand pouring in around the gap. You wedge your knee into it and push, using your body like a pry bar. The door swings open with a grinding shriek of sand in metal. A small avalanche spills into the station interior. You pause at the threshold, staring into the dim space. It is not cozy. It is a metal box in the desert filled with equipment and fine dust, but it blocks wind, and that is luxury here. You step inside and pull the door as closed as it will go. It does not seal. Sand has already claimed the bottom edge. Still, the wind noise drops immediately, from roar to muffled hiss. Your ears ring in the sudden quiet. You stand in the station's dim light, the only illumination coming through dusty panels and small instrument screens. A monitor glows faintly, showing numbers that pretend they can tame this place. Temperature, pressure, wind speed, humidity. The desert translated into data. You set your pack down carefully, like it is fragile. In here, you finally have enough stillness to notice your own condition. Your hands tremble slightly. Your forearms are coated in dried mud and salt. Your throat is sore, scraped by dust. Your lips sting when you breathe. You peel your scarf down, and the air inside tastes metallic. You swallow and feel a scratch. You cough once, and the sound is loud in the box. You force yourself to do the boring tasks first. Boring is survival. You check the emergency water cache, a sealed container mounted low on the wall. You open it with stiff fingers and find bottles inside. Dusty but intact, relief hits you in a wave that makes you sit down hard. You do not drink much yet. You drink enough to stop the immediate spiral. 2 slow mouthfuls, then a third. You feel the water spread into your chest like warmth. Your heartbeat slows from frantic to merely rude. You take a moment to breathe without fabric over your mouth. Then you realize how much dust you have already inhaled, and you put the scarf back on anyway. Even in shelter, the desert is not finished with you. You unlace your boots, and the smell that escapes is sharp and unpleasant. Sweat and mud and salt, sealed all day, fermented by heat. You pull one boot off, and grit falls out like spilled sugar. Your sock is stiff in places where mud dried. You peel it down carefully, because skin will come with it if you rush. The blister on your heel is worse now. The tape has shifted, and raw skin has rubbed against grit all afternoon. It is open, red, and angry. You clean it the best you can without wasting water, using a small wipe from the station kit. The wipe comes away brown. You apply a dressing, then tape it down with more care than the first attempt. You press the dressing down until it stops peeling at the corners. Then, you stare at your own foot like it betrayed you. You do not get angry, because anger burns fuel. You just accept that your heel is now a management problem. You pull on a spare sock from your pack, the cleanest fabric you have left. It feels wrong, soft against a world that has only done abrasion all day. You slide your boot back on carefully, and you keep the laces loose. Tight laces would grind the blister like a mortar and pestle. Loose laces mean less control on rock, so you pick your poison. The station air is cool enough to trick you into relaxing, but the metal walls keep ticking faintly, expanding and contracting. The whole place sounds like it is breathing in shallow, reluctant breaths. You stand and roll your shoulders, trying to unhook tension from muscle. Your back answers with a dull ache, the kind you earn. Honestly, you reach into a side compartment and pull out the resupply items. Filters first, then batteries, then a small bag of desiccant packs. The station does not care about your suffering. It cares about dust, voltage, and whether the anemometer can still spin. You move deeper inside, crouching to avoid banging your head on a cable run. A small screen shows wind speed fluctuating still elevated from the storm. It is a polite way of saying, the dunes are still rearranging furniture outside. You check the barometric pressure trend. It is falling slightly, not dramatic, but steady. Falling pressure is the desert clearing its throat. You wipe a layer of dust from a control panel, and the dust immediately reforms. Fine sand is everywhere, and it behaves like smoke. It creeps through seams, threads, and the tiny gaps you thought were sealed. You replace the first filter on the air intake. The old one is stained brown and stiff, like it has been used to bread chicken. You bag it and set it aside because you are supposed to bring it out. You swap batteries in a backup power unit, fingers clumsy but improving. Cold and water have brought some precision back into your hands. You take another small drink, not because you crave it, but because you are rehydrating on purpose. There is a difference, and the difference is whether you live through tomorrow. You listen for the radio expecting a crackle, a voice, anything. The station is quiet, other than its own electronic murmurs. You key the mic and speak your call sign, slow and clear. Your voice sounds strange in the scarf, like it belongs to someone older. You wait. Nothing comes back but static that rises and falls like distant surf. Either the other end is asleep or the atmosphere is playing games. At night, cooler air can bend radio waves differently, and dunes can block line of sight. Congratulations. Even your voice has to negotiate with physics. You try again, changing position, moving closer to the leeward wall. Still nothing. You do not panic, because you have the next best thing. A roof, a cache, a place to wait without being sand blasted into a cautionary tale. You sit on a low bench beside a cabinet of spare parts. The bench is cold metal, and it steals heat through your thighs. You pull a thin foam pad from under your pack and sit on that instead. Immediately, your body unclenches a fraction. That is the trick with comfort. It is not luxury. It is reduced heat loss. You pull out your headlamp and set it on the lowest setting. Light inside the station feels wrong, like lighting a match in a cave. Every surface looks dustier under illumination. You take inventory, because inventory is a way to stay sane. Water now includes the emergency cash bottles, plus what you carried in. Food is sparse, mostly dense bars and a small bag of nuts. Your stove is minimal, more for morale than cooking. Fuel is half full. Your GPS is sulking, but it still exists. Radio is functional, even if lonely. First aid kit is now missing a dressing and some tape. You check your cracked bottle again. The stress line is longer, the plastic whitening in that way. That means it is thinking about failure. You wrap it in cloth and wedge it so it will not flex. You have become the caretaker of a fragile container in a place defined by dehydration. The irony is not funny, but it is consistent. Outside, the wind rises and falls, testing the station edges. Sand taps the wall with a soft, endless patter. It sounds like rain. If rain hated you, you remember the mud pan and the black water pooling in your footprints. Rain did happen recently, somewhere. Not enough to green the dunes, but enough to make traps. That is how deserts work. They do not give you resources. They give you problems in liquid form. You check the station humidity readout, and it is higher than you expected. Not high like a forest, just high for a place that should be bone dry. Moisture is in the air, and that means one more thing. Cold nights, and possibly dew on metal surfaces. Dew is the desert's most petty gift. It will offer you water, then evaporate it before you can feel grateful. You take your scarf off for a moment and breathe through your mouth. Your throat is raw, and you cough again, deeper this time. The cough tastes like old pennies and grit. You spit into a corner where sand has already piled, and it disappears. You rinse your mouth with a small sip and spit again. Do not swallow that mix unless you enjoy respiratory regret. You look at the instrument panel again. Wind direction is shifting a few degrees. The storm has passed, but the system that made it is still present. Air masses are still trading places above the erg. When wind direction changes, dunes do not argue. They simply start migrating in a new, preferred direction. That matters here, because the station is not on a concrete foundation. It is on the desert's temporary opinion of where ground should be. You step toward the hatch you used earlier and look out through a small gap. Stars are bright, and the dunes outside have softened into a dark, rolling silhouette. Sand is still moving at the crest lines, like smoke from a low fire. The station wall already has a fresh skirt of drifted grains against it. You have been inside for less than an hour, and the dune is already leaning back in. You close the hatch and exhale slowly. Shelter in an erg is a negotiation, not a victory. You decide to do one more practical thing before you rest. You set up a simple water catch because you are stubborn and the atmosphere is humid. A piece of plastic sheeting from the station kit, stretched slightly and angled. A clean bottle placed at the low point. If dew forms inside, it will run downward and collect. This will not save you, but it might buy you options later. Buying options is what survival is. You tape the sheeting in place and press hard to seal edges. Dust tries to get under the tape immediately. You press again and pretend you are winning. Then you pull your foam pad and sleeping bag to a corner away from the door gap. You pick the side that feels least drafty. A station is not built for comfort. It is built for measurement. It measures wind while wind tries to bury it. You lie down and feel the day replay in your legs. Your calves twitch, still climbing dunes in their dreams. Your heel throbs in time with your heartbeat. Your lips feel split at the corners, and you run your tongue over them carefully. Salt and cracked skin taste like bad decisions. You close your eyes, and for a moment you think sleep will come fast. Then the station creaks again, and your brain snaps awake. You listen hard. Not for animals, there are fewer of those than you would imagine. You listen for wind changes, for the pitch of sand on metal. The sound outside is steadier now. A sustained hiss. That means the wind has organized itself. A steady wind is not a comfort. A steady wind is a conveyor belt doing overtime. You sit up because you cannot help it. You check the wind speed reading again. It is climbing. Not into full storm territory yet, but higher than it should be at this hour. You look at wind direction. It has rotated farther than before. The dunes are about to start climbing a different face of this rock, and the station is sitting at the rock's edge like a snack. You do not have to fix the world tonight, but you do have to prevent a simple disaster, a blocked vent, a buried door, a solar panel lost under drifted sand. Desert infrastructure fails quietly. Then suddenly, when a system overheats or loses power, So you stand, tired and annoyed, and pull your boots back on. Congratulations, rest has been canceled by weather. You step outside through the grinding door gap. Night air hits you like a cold towel. Your sweat, dried earlier, now chills instantly. The sky is clean and sharp, stars hard as ice. The dunes around the station are darker now, but their crests shine faintly. Wind skims them, lifting a thin layer of sand and sending it into your face. You keep your scarf high and your eyes narrowed. You move to the upwind side of the station, where sand is piling. It has already formed a ramp against the wall, higher than before. You can see the pattern clearly in starlight. Wind hits the station, slows, drops its load. The sand settles like flour, then locks together. If it builds too high, it will bury lower vents and create a pressure seal at the door. A station that cannot breathe is just a metal coffin with sensors. You use your pole and shovel sand away from the intake vents first. You carve a shallow trench, not deep, just enough to keep airflow clear. The wind tries to refill it immediately, tossing grains back in. This is what fighting the erg looks like. Not a battle, more like brushing your teeth in a sandblaster. You move to the solar panel next. Its lower edge is buried deeper than earlier, the dune, inching up. You clear the panel surface with your glove, and your glove squeaks on the scratched glass. Abrasions scatter light, lowering efficiency. Sand does not have to break things to ruin them. It just has to dull them. You clear a channel downhill from the panel, so sand has a place to go. The moment you stop, the wind starts refilling it like a spiteful assistant. You pause and look out over the dunes. From here, the erg is a breathing animal, slow and methodical. You can almost see migration in the ripple patterns, the way lines shift. Dunes are not piles. They are flow frozen into shape. Every grain is waiting for the next push. You return to the door area and clear the base again. You widen the ramp you made earlier, making the slope gentler. A gentler slope collapses less, and it gives drifting sand a path that is not directly into the seam. You are not stopping the dune. You are redirecting it, like convincing a crowd to use a different door. After another stretch of digging, your shoulders sag, your breath fogs faintly in the cold. That surprises you, even though it should not. Desert nights can drop fast, especially in a basin near dunes. Cold air pools and settles, just like earlier in the Interdune trough. You go back inside, dragging a little sand with you. Inside, the quiet feels almost obscene. You pull your boots off again, because you cannot stand the grit. Your heel dressing has held, but the skin around it is angry. You flex your toes and feel tenderness along the ball of your foot now too. The blister has friends. You lie down again, more carefully this time, and you force your breathing to slow. Inhale through the nose as much as you can. Exhale longer than inhale. The old trick to convince your nervous system you are not dying. Your mind keeps trying to replay routes. The pan, the acacia skeleton, the erased marker, the radio mast that could have been a star. You let those thoughts drift because you cannot afford them. You focus instead on the station sounds. A faint fan, a periodic click from a relay, the outside hiss of sand. These become your lullaby, industrial and bleak. Sleep comes in thin layers. You doze, then wake, then doze again. Each time you wake, you check the wind speed on the monitor like a nervous habit. It rises, then steadies, then rises again. Around the middle of the night, you wake to a new sound. Not louder, but lower, like a heavier hand on the wall. Sand is hitting the station in thicker bursts. The wind has shifted again, just enough to aim a new stream at your corner. You sit up and listen, head tilted. The station is being sanded in real time, its metal skin slowly frosted. You could go out and dig again, but you also need rest, because tomorrow is not optional. So you compromise. You check the vents from inside, feeling for airflow with the back of your hand. Air is still moving, not strong, but present. You check the door seam. Sand is piled, but the gap still exists. You decide to stay inside, and you accept that the desert will gain a few centimeters tonight. That is the only kind of generosity you will get. Toward pre-dawn, you smell something faint and strange, a cool metallic scent, like wet stone. You sit up and look at your improvised dew catcher. The plastic sheet has tiny beads on it, catching dim light. They slide slowly toward the bottle. Not much, but real. You pick up the bottle and tilt it. A shallow pool at the bottom. Maybe a few mouthfuls. Congratulations, you harvested the air. You do not drink it yet. You cap it and set it aside, because this is not thirst water. This is emergency buffer, and buffers are mental stability. Dawn arrives as a gradual lightening seeping through dusty panels. The outside wind is still active, but the air feels slightly calmer. Not calm, just less spiteful. You sit up and stretch slowly, joints complaining. Your heel hurts immediately, a reminder that the day starts with damage. You eat a small portion of food, not because you crave it, but because calories become heat and movement. In the desert, you do not eat for pleasure. You eat to keep your muscles from dissolving. You drink a little more from the cache, slow and controlled. Too much water at once can make you nauseous when you are depleted. Small amounts, frequent, with salt if you have it. You check the station logbook, a battered notebook in a drawer. Entries are sparse, practical, written by people who do not waste ink. Wind events. Battery swaps. Notes about drift accumulation near the south wall. A sketch of the station perimeter with arrows showing where sand piles fastest. This place has memory, and it writes it down because the dunes erase everything else. You add your own note. Pan crust broken, mud present, avoid crossing. Windstorm buried markers, station door drifted shut. Your handwriting looks shaky, like it belongs to someone older. You close the book and feel a strange satisfaction. If you vanish, at least the station will have your footnotes. You check the radio again at dawn, when conditions sometimes improve. You call out, voice steady, repeating twice. This time, after a long pause, you get a reply. Faint, crackling, but real. A voice asks for your status. Clipped and careful, you answer with the essentials. At station, alive, compromised boots, low water but cache present. Wind shift, overnight. Drift building. The voice acknowledges, then tells you what you already suspect. Vehicle cannot reach you today. Track is likely swallowed. They will attempt approach from the Hamada edge tomorrow if winds ease. Until then, maintain station, conserve supplies. Do not wander. The transmission ends in static. You stare at the radio for a moment, then set it down gently. Help exists, but it is on the desert schedule, and the desert has never worn a watch. You step outside in early light to assess the damage. The station looks more buried than yesterday, edges softened. Sand has piled against the wall in a smooth wedge. Your trench by the vents has partially filled. The solar panel is half lost again, its frame nearly level with the drift. You walk around the perimeter slowly, reading the microgeography. Wind has scoured one side down to gravel. The opposite side is a growing dune, tight against the metal. This is how an object disappears here. Not swallowed in one dramatic gulp, just slowly framed, then packed, then forgotten. You decide to spend the morning doing maintenance because midday travel is still a furnace. You dig out the vents again and you clear the solar panel properly this time. You pile the removed sand into a low berm downwind, hoping to redirect flow. It will not last, but it might delay. Delay is also survival. As you work, you notice channels in the gravel fan nearby. The channels are shallow cuts, braided and dry, like veins drawn in gravel with a dull knife. They run away from the rock in fans, then fade into sand as if the desert gets bored of remembering water. You crouch beside one and drag a finger along its edge. The gravel is sorted, smaller pieces tucked into the inside curve, larger stones dropped where flow slowed. That is water's handwriting, even when the ink is gone. A flash flood came through here at some point, not long ago in geological terms, maybe not long ago in human terms either. In the Sahara, those two clocks sometimes overlap, just to keep you anxious. You look up at the Jebel's face and notice a darker stain line, a faint mineral wash on the rock. It is the kind of stain that only happens when water briefly pretends it belongs here. Congratulations, you camped beside a drainage that can wake up and try to kill you. It is morning now, clear sky, no clouds building, no smell of rain. But the channels are still a warning because the station sits where sand and stone trade power. Water, when it arrives, will not politely avoid your metal box. It will follow the path of least resistance, which is usually the path you stood in. So, you make a second list in your head, quieter than the first. Keep the vents clear. Yes. Keep the solar panel exposed. Yes. But also, do not sleep in the lowest spot outside the door. Do not stack gear in a channel because it looks tidy. Do not assume a dry gully is a safe gully just because it is currently bored. You walk the fan out a little farther, stepping carefully over loose stones. The gravel crunch is clean, almost comforting, until you realize it carries. Sound travels off rock differently than off sand. If anyone was within a kilometer, they would hear you coming like a polite dinner bell. You stop and listen anyway. There is only wind and the soft abrasive hush of sand still moving on distant crests. You return to the station and work another hour because the sun is climbing again. Your shadow shrinks against the metal wall, and the wall itself warms to an unpleasant touch. When the heat returns, it does not do drama. It just resumes its job. You eat another small portion, forcing yourself to chew slowly so you do not waste saliva. Your mouth feels like it is lined with cloth, dry and stubborn. You take a controlled drink, Then cap the bottle like it is a fragile agreement. The cracked bottle stays wrapped, treated gently like an injured animal. You check it again anyway, squeezing lightly, watching for betrayal. No new leak yet, just the same pale stress line, slightly longer in your imagination. You retreat into the station before midday turns the gravel into a skillet. Inside, the air is cooler, but it smells like dust and warmed plastic. You sit near the instrument panel and watch the wind trace its own small story. Speed rising, then falling, direction wobbling a few degrees, then committing again. This is not calm. This is the desert adjusting its grip. You take the opportunity to do the quiet maintenance, the kind that makes you feel less helpless. You wipe sensor housings with a soft brush. You check the anemometer, making sure it still spins freely. It does, but the bearings sound faintly gritty, like a whispering complaint. Sand has a talent for getting into places that were designed by optimistic engineers. You swap out another filter because the storm loaded the system with fine dust. The old filter comes free with a reluctant pull, stiff and brown. You bag it, label it, and set it with the other because somebody, someday, will care. You also check the station's emergency supplies, not just for water, but for redundancy. A small hand shovel, a roll of tape, a spare gasket for a hatch, a flare, expired but still dramatic, a thin foil blanket that crinkles like an insult. You lay them out, then put them back because order is a kind of calm. Your heel throbs while you do all this, keeping time like a cruel metronome. You loosen your boot again and air your foot, letting the skin dry. The blister dressing is holding, but the surrounding skin looks macerated, pale from yesterday's damp. You sprinkle a little powder from the kit, then rewrap, trying to prevent the dressing from turning into glue. You tell yourself you will not be walking far today. Then you remember the voice on the radio. Vehicle cannot reach you today. Try tomorrow. If winds ease, everything in the Sahara comes with an if clause. By early afternoon, the station becomes an oven that simply happens to be shaded. The metal walls heat up, then radiate inward slowly, like a patient punishment. You open a vent, flap a crack, trying to encourage airflow without inviting a dune inside. The air that comes in is hot and dry, and it smells faintly of warm stone. You sit still, conserving sweat, because sweating now is just paying a tax you cannot afford. Your thoughts drift toward the prints you saw at the start, the one-way tracks. You try not to, but your mind insists on finishing stories. If someone went down a slipface and did not come back out, where did they go? There are many answers that do not require drama. They turn back by a different route, and the dunes erased it. They found a vehicle track, and you never saw the exit prints. They sat down behind a ridge and waited, and someone found them. And there are answers that do require drama, which is why your mind keeps chewing on it. The Sahara does not need monsters. It has math, heat loss at night, dehydration by day, navigation errors that grow like interest. The station hums quietly beside you, pretending to be permanent. You glance again at the wind direction. It has rotated a bit more, settling into a new angle that aims directly at the station's upwind corner. That corner is already collecting sand. You can almost picture the dune forming, grain by grain, like a slow snowfall. With worse intentions, you consider going outside again to dig. Then You stop yourself. You will lose too much water in midday heat. You will sweat, and sweat will evaporate, and you will not get it back. So you wait, and you let the desert make a small down payment on burying you. Waiting is not passive here. Waiting is a choice you defend. Late afternoon finally arrives, shadows lengthening enough to make the world readable again. The station's interior cools a few degrees, and you feel your shoulders drop. You take another slow drink, then stand and check the door seam. Sand has crept higher, pressing into the lower edge like it is trying to listen. You push the door outward a few inches, testing. It grinds, but it moves. That is enough. You step outside into air that is still hot, but no longer cruelly hot. The sun is angled now, and the dunes beyond the rock glow in soft gold. It would look peaceful if you did not know it was always moving. You go straight to the vents and clear them again. Widening the trench you carved, you scrape sand into your berm, then pat the berm down lightly, trying to make it less eager to collapse. It is like building a sandcastle in a river current. Then, you clear the solar panel again, brushing its surface with a soft cloth, because your glove would scratch it worse. The panel is already frosted from abrasion, but you do what you can. You angle it slightly, checking its tilt, making sure it faces the sun's path well enough to keep the batteries healthy. A station without power is a box of dead sensors, and you are not digging out dead weight. You circle the station perimeter one more time, reading where sand is scouring and where it is depositing. The downwind side is stripped to gravel, almost clean. The upwind side is building a ramp, smoother each hour. You consider moving some rocks from the fan to create a rough barrier, but rock barriers here become sand traps, collecting deposits and growing into new dunes. Anything you place becomes part of the flow. So, you choose a smaller intervention. You carve a shallow diversion, a gentle channel in the sand that encourages drift to slide past the door rather than into it. You are not stopping the erg. You are convincing it to choose a slightly different path of least resistance. The wind picks up briefly, and sand stings your cheeks, reminding you who has the real authority. You go back inside with a thin film of grit already on your eyelashes. Inside, you sit and key the radio again, not because you expect conversation, but because routine keeps you anchored. You give your status, brief and factual, no new injuries, station operational, drift accumulating, wind rotating. The reply comes faintly, a crackle and a clipped voice. They are staging at the Hamada Edge again. They will attempt approach early tomorrow before midday heat, using a line of marker poles if visibility holds. If the dunes swallow the track too badly, they will stop rather than risk the vehicle. You understand, because you are living inside the reason. You acknowledge and end transmission. Then sit quietly with the static for a moment. The static sounds like distant surf, which is funny because the Sahara used to be seabed in places. Not metaphorically, literally. Marine sediments, ancient shallow seas, fish fossils and rocks that now bake under a sun that forgot water. Forget the postcard version of a desert as just sand. Here is the tectonic truth. This sand did not appear by magic. It is the leftover dust of mountains and the crumbs of ancient stone, ground down over long time. The Sahara is not a place. It is a process. Wind, water, and time dismantling continents, one grain at a time. The erg is where the grains gather because basins and prevailing winds create storage. A sand sea is a warehouse for erosion, stacked in moving piles. Each dune is a temporary account balance. The wind deposits, then withdraws, then redeposits somewhere else. And the rock island you are on is the opposite. A resistant core, a leftover knob of harder material, maybe sandstone cemented better, maybe an igneous intrusion that refused to crumble. The jebel interrupts the flow, and that is why the station exists here. You can anchor instruments to rock, at least for a while. You can place a metal box in the lee, and it might survive long enough to justify the paperwork. But the erg is patient. Given enough seasons, it will bury even this stubborn outcrop's edges in aprons of sand. The station is proof of that, half swallowed already. Night returns again, and with it, the fast desert cooling. The air outside drops from hot to merely warm, then to cold enough to make you pull your collar up. You set up the dew catcher again, cleaning the plastic with a cloth first. Dust ruins condensation by giving water too many places to cling and evaporate. You want droplets to bead and run, not spread thin and vanish. You angle the sheet more steeply tonight, creating a clearer low point. You place a bottle there and secure it so it cannot tip. Then you eat a little more, forcing the last dry crumbs down with a sip. Your stomach is not interested in food, but your muscles are. You check your heel again, because pain has a way of escalating in the dark. The dressing comes off with effort. The wound looks cleaner, but angry. You reapply a fresh pad and tape it more carefully, pressing the edges down until they stick despite dust. You talk to your foot silently, the way you talk to a tool that is malfunctioning. Please hold together. Just one more day. Outside, sand taps the station wall again, steady and persistent. You lie down on your foam pad, sleeping bag pulled up to your chest. The station ticks with thermal contraction, metal complaining in small pops. You close your eyes and let the sound become distant. Sleep comes in uneven pieces, interrupted by the wind changing pitch. At some point in the night, you wake to a deeper hush outside. Not calm, a different kind of motion. You sit up and look at the wind readout. Wind speed has dropped slightly, but direction has shifted again, more decisively. It is now pushing sand from a new angle, one that targets the door side more directly. Of course it does. The desert heard you were comfortable and decided to adjust. You pull on your boots and step outside into cold that bites your nose. Stars overhead are sharp enough to feel like they could cut. Your breath shows faintly, a pale puff that vanishes immediately. You walk to the door area and see that the diversion you carved is filling. Sand has piled into it, smoothing it out like the desert is erasing your handwriting. The drift against the door has grown again, pressing higher. Using the shovel now instead of your pole, because metal on sand is more efficient. Each scoop makes a soft scrape, and the sound disappears into wind. You clear enough to keep the door functional, then move to the vents, clearing the trench again. This is what your night becomes. Short bursts of labor in cold air, then retreat inside to conserve heat. You are learning the station's rhythm, not by choice. The station is a living thing now, and you are its immune system, swatting away accumulation. When you finally return inside, your hands ache from cold and vibration. You rub them together, then tuck them under your armpits until feeling returns. You check the dew catcher. Beads are forming again, small and delicate, sliding down the sheet. You watch them for a minute, hypnotized. Water is falling out of the air, quietly, as if the desert is embarrassed to be generous. Toward pre-dawn, you collect the bottle. A little more than last time, still not much, but enough to matter psychologically. You cap it and set it aside, a tiny reserve. Then you sit and wait for light, because you know tomorrow is supposed to be the day someone tries to reach you. Dawn arrives in pale layers, washing the station interior with dusty gray. You stretch slowly, joints stiff, heel throbbing immediately. You eat, drink, and pack your gear in a more organized way than yesterday, because anticipation makes you tidy. You radio in at first light. Your voice comes out hoarse but steady. You report wind conditions and drift accumulation, because that is what matters for a vehicle approach. The response comes clearer now. They are moving soon, trying to catch the narrow window. When sand is firm from night cooling, they will approach cautiously, and if they cannot see the jebel clearly, they will stop. You acknowledge and set the radio down, then step outside to scan. The dunes beyond the rock are visible, their crests pale in early light. The air is relatively clear. No new storm wall, no heavy haze. This is as good as it gets. You climb onto a small rise of gravel near the station, careful of your heel. From here, you can see farther across the erg edge toward the Hamada. The Hamada is a darker strip in the distance, flat and hard, like the world's worn-down tabletop. Between you and it, a field of dunes and low sand sheets. If a vehicle is coming, it will likely skirt the erg, avoiding the tallest crests. You scan for movement, for dust plumes, for anything unnatural. For a while, there is nothing. Then, far off, a faint flicker of dust. It could be wind lifting sand off a ridge. It could be a vehicle's wake. You watch it, holding your breath without meaning to. The flicker appears again, then again, slightly more consistent. A thin tan plume that does not behave like wind alone. It has rhythm, pulses, the stop-start of tires over uneven ground. Relief rises in you, then immediately gets undercut by realism. A vehicle near an erg is not a rescue helicopter. It is a fragile machine about to be introduced to moving terrain. You keep watching as the plume grows closer, then fades behind a low ridge, then appears again. They are moving slowly, cautious, probably following old marker poles or a track memory that may not exist anymore. You glance down at the station's immediate surroundings. The drift at the upwind wall has grown into a more defined ramp, smooth and steep. If the wind strengthens, it will climb faster. You decide to do one more quick round of clearing before they arrive, because if they reach a buried door, you will scream. You clear the door base again, carving out a usable gap. You clear the vents, you brush the solar panel, you move fast but controlled, working in the cool morning window. Then you stop, because your heel reminds you that speed has consequences. You stand still and listen. A distant engine sound does not carry well over dunes, but over Hamada and rock it can. You catch a faint hum, then lose it. then catch it again. Like a mosquito far away, they are still coming. You key the radio and give them a micro update. Visibility decent. Drift moderate near station. Approach from the gravel fan side if possible. The reply is brief, acknowledging, then static. You wait again, perched by the station wall in the lee, letting rock block some wind. Minutes pass slowly. The dust plume becomes more obvious now, and you finally see the vehicle as a dark dot. It crawls along the edge where sand meets gravel, trying to avoid the softest patches. This is where deserts play their oldest joke on machines. Firm ground and soft ground can look identical until weight tests it. You watch the vehicle slow, then angle slightly, then slow again, as if it is sniffing the terrain like an animal. Then, abruptly, the dot stops. The dust plume collapses and settles. You feel your stomach tighten because you know what stopped means. Stopped means stuck or uncertain or both. You key the radio immediately, asking for status. A pause, then a crackling reply. They hit a soft pocket, wheels digging. They are not fully buried, but they are not moving forward either. They will attempt to back out and reroute. Your relief deflates, replaced by a quieter dread. If they get stuck too deep, the rescue becomes a second rescue. Congratulations, you are about to watch the desert collect more metal. You stand on your gravel rise and look at the route between them and you. A low sand sheet, then a shallow